I am 87 years old, and I want to confess something about the sound inside my house. There were 7 noises, 7 of them, that I switched on or started up or hung from the porch rafter for no reason, except that I did not want the rooms around me to be silent. I counted them the winter before last, with the stove unlit and my coffee going cold in my hand. When the whole list was written down, there was no shame in me, and there was no pride either. What I felt was honest, and honest had not sat with me in a long while. Then I put the pencil down, let the house go as quiet as it wished, and listened for what was underneath. Come sit down with me a while. Pull that chair nearer, the one with the worn arm, and give an old man a piece of your afternoon. I am not saying I found peace out here. Whatever the silence turned into for me, it repaired nothing about my body or my years, and I will not stand here and promise it will do a single thing for yours. It is not peace. It is not loneliness. It is one old man learning the difference between quiet and missing. Those two had shared a room inside me my whole life, and I could never tell which one was which. My grandmother used to say, "A quiet house is not an empty house. It is a house waiting for you to be in it." She told me that when I was a boy and frightened of the upstairs after dark. I thought she meant ghosts. She meant me. That room was not missing anything. I simply was not in it yet, not with my whole self. And my grandfather used to say, "Noise is a coat you put on when you are cold in a room that is not cold." He said it about men. He had watched them talk from sunup to sundown about weather and fence posts. Not one word of it needed, all of it holding something off at arm's length. He said a man will sweat clean through that coat before he will admit he never needed the thing. The coat is the whole of what I am confessing to you today. Every one of these 7 was a sleeve. The first confession is the radio. 6 years it ran. From the minute my feet found the floor until the minute I lay down again, that little brown box on the windowsill talked and sang and argued with itself about troubles 1,000 miles past my fence line. If you had stopped me on the road on any of those days and asked what the radio had just been saying, nothing would have come back to me. Not a sentence. I was not listening to that thing. I was being accompanied by it, which is a poorer arrangement altogether. A man who lives beside a stream stops hearing the water. He will stand on his own porch and tell a visitor there is no sound out here, nothing. And the visitor will look at him strangely because the water is right there, running as it ran the day he moved in. That radio was my stream. I had gone deaf to it on purpose, and I kept it running anyway. Before the second one, I want to set something down on the table between us, gently, the way a man sets down a full cup. The Native Way is the small book where I gathered the sayings of the old ones and the plain daily practices that carried me through my long years alone. The link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. No pressure from me, none at all. It will sit there quietly if your heart ever wants it, and I am right beside you whether you open it or not. And now let me give you the second confession. The second confession is that I left the television talking to an empty chair. I would put it on after breakfast and then walk out to the barn and stay 3 hours, 4, mending what wanted mending. That whole time, in my front room, a man in a suit was explaining the world to a chair with a blanket folded over the back of it. Nobody sat there. Nobody had sat there since my wife stopped needing a place to sit. Lorna came by one afternoon without warning me first, the way she does, and let herself in. When I came up from the barn with hay in my sleeves, she was standing in the doorway, wearing a strange expression. She asked me, kindly enough, who had been watching all that. I said nobody. Then I heard the word come out of my own mouth, and I did not care for the shape of it. After she drove off, I went in and shut the thing down and stood in the sudden hush of my front room. The icebox hummed. A truck went by out on the county road. 20 minutes, maybe, before my chest drew tight in a way I could not have explained to another living person, and I crossed the rug and turned it back on and told myself I wanted the noon report. A lamp burning at noon is no crime. It is only light where the light already falls, and every man who keeps one lit knows precisely why he keeps it. Reaching for that switch means agreeing out loud that the sun is doing fine without your help. The third confession is a small one, and it shames me worse than the large ones. I talked my chores out loud so the room would answer me. Not muttering either. Full sentences, in the voice I would have used on another person. Well now, that is the kettle on. We will get the boots next, and then we will see about the mail. There was no we. There had not been a we in that kitchen for a long stretch of years, and I kept saying it anyway, because the word built a second person out of nothing but air. My grandson Peter stood in the doorway one morning and caught me at it. He was 15. He did not laugh, and I have always been grateful for that. He asked who I was talking to. I told him, the boots. My grandfather, when he caught me being foolish as a boy, had a line about a bird that finds its own echo off a canyon wall and answers it again, and sings away a whole afternoon at a voice it takes for company. That bird goes to roost hungry. It never once flew around the rock to look, because there was nothing on the far side to find. The fourth confession involves the telephone and my friend Marcus, who has put up with me for 60 years. I would call him on a Tuesday for no reason I could have named. Just checking in, I would say. Then the pair of us would sit there on the line breathing at each other while I hunted through my head for anything worth the trouble of a phone call, and came up short, because there had never been an anything. I had called about the ringing. 4 minutes, 5 at the outside. Then, well, I will let you go. He had nowhere to be. Neither did I. There was a stretch in there when I rang him 3 days running, and nothing whatsoever had happened in between. The corn was the same corn. On the third day he asked whether I was all right. I said of course I am, and I was, and I also was not, and neither of us owned the vocabulary to sort out which. One winter he finally told me, "You are allowed to just say you wanted to hear a voice." I laughed like the man was joking. The man was not joking. The old ones had a saying about somebody who knocks on a door with no errand behind him. He does not want the person inside. He wants the noise a door makes when a knuckle strikes it, which is the noise of somebody being home somewhere in this world. I knocked on Marcus that way for years, and he never once mentioned it, which is its own sort of friendship. Another sleeve, and my arm was all the way down inside it. The fifth confession, I invented work for the evenings. Anybody who has kept a place understands there is real work, and then there is the other kind. Real work is the fence that is down. The other kind is the woodpile. I shifted from the north side of the porch around to the south side at 9 o'clock at night by lantern, and then shifted back the following week, telling myself it would season better over there. I did that sort of thing all through the dark months. I would look at an evening the way you look at an empty plate and think, that will not do, something has to go on it. Sweeping a floor that has already been swept is not tidiness. That is just a man dragging a broom back and forth so his hands will have an argument to settle, so the hours after supper will have a shape to them, so the clock over the sink has something to compete against. My people had a name for hands like mine, busy hands, empty of purpose. They carried a great many of us through hard winters, and they kept a few of us from ever once sitting down. The sixth confession is what I would take back first, if a man were permitted to take things back. I went visiting in order to be visited. That was the arithmetic running underneath it, and I worked that arithmetic every week of my life without ever saying the numbers aloud. I drove out to Lorna's twice in October. Nobody drove out to me. I stopped going in November, and I waited, and I let the not going stand as a message, and naturally she never received any message, because it was written in a language I had invented by myself and taught to no one. The plain fact, I never made that drive for her face. I made it so the phone would ring on Thursday. Peter told me long afterward that his mother had asked about me twice that same month, and that she stayed home because she believed I preferred my own company. That is the sentence I keep turning over in my hands. She had every reason on earth to think it, because I never once told her different. And telling her different would have meant standing in her kitchen and admitting the very thing 7 noises existed to keep unadmitted. A man can walk down to the river every day of his life, stand on the bank, hear it going by, and never once kneel and drink. He will tell you he loves that river. He will die thirsty on its bank. Now the 7th confession, and it is the one I am least proud of. I hung a wine chime on my porch, not a little one. Long, heavy tubes, tuned low, loud enough to reach me at the far end of the field with my back turned. I put it up deliberately, and I will give you my reason plainly, so the porch would always be saying something, so no hour of the day or the night could pass out there in complete silence. It rang when the wind rose. It rang again as the wind fell off. It kept ringing when nothing whatsoever was happening, and I called the sound pretty, and I told company the same, and they agreed, and prettiness was never why those tubes hung on my porch. 11 years, that chime was the last thing to reach me before sleep and the first thing at daybreak, and I would have sworn to anybody who asked that I loved it. I did not love it. I required it to be there so that nothing else would have to be. That same winter, on the morning I set the pencil down, I went out and took it off its hook. No fuss about it. I carried the stepladder over, lifted the tubes free, and laid them in a box in the barn. Then I stood on my porch in the cold, and I heard the pines. They had been there the entire time. Behind the radio, behind the set talking to nobody, behind my own voice and the ringing telephone and the woodpile and those tubes of metal, the wind had been moving through the trees along that ridge every hour of every year I lived in this house. It makes a sound I have no proper word for. Something like water. Something like breathing. And I had covered it over because I was afraid of what I might hear once I stopped covering it. I stayed out until my ears burned with cold. The coat came off that morning, and the room turned out never to have been cold at all. Now I want to be careful with you, because a list like that one can curdle in a man overnight. Naming those 7 was not the same as hating myself for them. It took the better part of a season to learn that difference, and I would rather hand it over to you already learned, so you do not have to spend a whole winter on it the way I did. A man is not his noises. The radio was a thing I switched on. It was not a flaw stitched into me before I was born. The chime hung from a hook I had driven into a beam myself, and a hook lets go the instant you lift a thing off it. Every one of those 7 was something I did, over and over, out of an ordinary fear I never once examined. What a man does, he can notice. What a man is, he is stuck with. I spent decades believing those 2 were identical, and they never were. It is not weakness. It is not failure. It is a man with cold hands finding out the room was warm. Once I understood that much, the whole list quit being an accusation and became a map instead. There is no shame in a map. A map only tells you which country you have been walking around in and which way the water runs through it. Nobody is insulted by being shown where he stands. He is only insulted when somebody tells him he was born standing there and cannot move. I quit apologizing to the ceiling at night. I took up something better, which was noticing. Only noticing. Reaching for a knob and stopping my hand partway there and asking myself plainly, what am I about to cover up? Let me gather this up for you now, the way my grandmother gathered the ends of her shawl. The radio that ran 6 years and told me nothing I could repeat. The set left running for a chair nobody sat in. My chores spoken aloud so a room would answer. Telephone calls with no errand in them. Work invented after dark. Visiting done so that somebody would visit back. And the chime hung up there so my porch would never stop talking. 7. The whole coat, sleeve by sleeve. Now turn all of it toward your own rooms a minute, because I am not the only man who ever pulled this on. What happens in your house when nobody is coming over? Is a screen going right now behind you while you sit here with me? When you walk into an empty place, what does your hand reach for? And does it reach before you have even got your coat off the shoulder? Do you telephone people you have nothing to say to? Do you find a job for 8 o'clock at night that could just as well wait until Saturday morning? And if all of it went quiet at once, what would be sitting in the room with you? I am not asking any of that to shame you. I am asking because nobody ever thought to ask me, and I could have used the question 40 years sooner than I got around to it. I know what a few of you are thinking, because I thought it myself with the stepladder still in my hands. Is it too late for me? I cannot promise you anything. I will not tell you the quiet hands back what you have lost, or mends one thing, or arrives easy, because I have never seen your rooms and I know nothing about your losses. What I do know is this much. At 87, sitting here, I still have the ability to notice one noise, and I can make one plain choice about it. My age has taken neither of those from me, and I have no cause to believe it has taken them from you. That is enough to begin with. It was enough for me. I would like to hear from you now, so tell me which number hit closest to home, down in the comments, the radio, the chair, the talking aloud, the telephone, the made-up evening work, the visiting, or the chime. And if it happens to be one I never named, give me that one instead, because I read every comment that arrives, every last one, and there are nights when your words are the final thing these eyes look at before the lamp goes out. Then come back and sit with me again tomorrow, and we will let the house be quiet together.